Today's assignment is going to be IXL Section K.8, solving two-step linear inequalities. I'm going to go through some examples so that you know how to do them and what to expect on today's assignment. If you recall from our last couple of assignments in IXL, to solve an inequality, you do everything the same as you would when you have a regular equation. The only thing you got to watch out for is when you multiply or divide both sides by a negative number. When you do that, the sign flips. I'm going to go over some examples, and when we get to an example where the sign flips, I'll refresh your memory. The first example that we have is a pretty basic and easy example. Let me write it over here so I could work it out. So we're trying to get the variable j alone on one side of the inequality. The inequality is this sign right here. That's the inequality. Alright, so I want to get the variable j alone. That means I got to get the number 10 and the number 9 to the other side of the inequality. You got to move them in the right order. If you move them in the wrong order, you're going to get it wrong. Okay, so the way I always say to do it is that the number that's with the variable, you move last. You leave that one for last. You got to get rid of this one first. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this 10 by subtracting 10 from both sides of the inequality. So on this side, 10 minus 10 is 0. That cancels out. And on this side, 1 minus 10 is negative 9. 1 minus 10 is negative 9. Remember, on a number line, here's number 1. If I take away 10, I got to go into the negative numbers. Okay? And the numbers are going like this on a number line. So 1 minus 1 is 0, but I'm doing 1 minus 10. So that's 9 more numbers this way. So I'm going to end up at negative 9. Okay, now I haven't done anything with the 9j, so I just bring that down. Okay, now to get j by itself, now I got to move this 9 to the other side and do the opposite of multiplication, which will be division. So I'm going to divide by 9. And j is going to be less than negative 1. That's my answer. A negative number divided by a positive number equals a negative. A negative divided by a positive equals a negative. And 9 divided by 9 equals 1. So that's going to be my answer. J is less than negative 1. You're going to see that most of these examples look the same. So in math, one of the main things you got to do is recognize the pattern and recognize what to do, because you're going to be doing the same thing every time. Okay, so now we have this problem right here. Negative 2c minus 2 is greater than or equal to negative 8. My goal is to get the c by itself. So like I said earlier, the number that's with the variable, I'm going to leave for last. The first thing I'm going to get rid of is this minus 2 right here. Okay, and I'm going to get rid of it by adding 2 to both sides. So when I add 2 to both sides, right here, negative 2 plus 2 is 0. So I'm just going to be left with this. And on the other side, negative 8 plus 2 is negative 6. Right? Here's my number line. If I'm at, whenever you add 2, I don't care, like if it's 10 plus 2 or 20 plus 2, or 100 plus 2, you always go 2 numbers to the right on the number line. The thing is, you're starting at negative 8. So when I go 2 numbers to the right, I'm going to be at negative 6. So negative 8 plus 2 is negative 6. Okay, now I'm still trying to get the c by itself. So I'm going to move, this negative 2 is multiplying with the c. So when I move it to the other side of the inequality, I'm going to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. Okay, now when you multiply or divide both sides by a negative number, the inequality is going to flip directions, like that. It's going to flip directions. Negative 6 divided by negative 2 is positive 3. Okay, so that's going to be my answer. When I divide or multiply both sides of an inequality by a negative number, the sign flips directions. So the answer for this one is c is less than or equal to 3. C is less than or equal to 3. That's the answer. Okay, now in case you forgot, let me tell you why the sign flips. I already said it in the previous class, but we have some new students in this class, and I just want to refresh your memory so that you don't forget. The reason that the sign flips is the following. When you have, let me put some easy numbers. Like 1 is less than 2. All right, 1 is less than 2. If I multiply both sides of this inequality by a positive number, like let's say positive 2, if I multiply both sides by positive 2, okay, the relationship stays the same. When I multiply both sides by positive 2, I get 2 on this side and 4 on this side. And that statement is still true. 2 is less than 4. 2 is less than 4. Just like at the beginning, I said 1 is less than 2. Okay, now let's try the same experiment, but this time let me use multiply both sides by a negative number. Okay, so again, let's say 1 is less than 2. Let's say I multiply both sides by negative 2 instead of positive 2. Let's say I multiply both sides by negative 2. If I multiply both sides by negative 2, I'm going to get negative 2 on this side and negative 4 on this side. Now if I put this sign, this is wrong. This is wrong. This is not true. Because look, on a number line, here's 0, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, okay? Negative 2 is actually bigger than negative 4. It's bigger, it's not smaller. If I leave the sign like that, this is wrong. It's saying that negative 2 is smaller, is less than negative 4. And that's not the case, that's wrong. The correct relationship is that negative 2 is bigger, is greater than negative 4. If the number is to the right, it's bigger than the numbers on the left. Just like the more you go to the right, these numbers are bigger than the numbers on the left. Negative 2 is bigger, is greater than negative 4. So when you have inequalities, if you multiply or divide both sides by a negative number, the relationship between the numbers changes and you have to flip the sign. Hopefully, understanding why you do it will help you remember that you have to do it. Again, whenever you have inequalities, that's the only thing you have to look out for that's different. Everything else is exactly the same as you would do it if you have a regular equation. All right, here's another example. Okay, so like I said, these once you get the hang of it, they're all going to be the same, very similar. Okay, I got that. I'm trying to get z by itself, so the first thing I'm going to move is this minus 2 by adding 2 to both sides. This will cancel out. Right here, negative 6 plus 2 is negative 4. Now I got over here negative 1z. I'm still trying to get z by itself, so now I'm going to move negative 1 to the other side of the inequality. And when I move it, since I'm going to divide both sides by a negative number, the sign has to flip directions. The sign has to flip directions. So right here, negative 1 divided by negative 1 equals positive 1. And negative 4 divided by negative 1 equals positive 4. Because a negative divided by a negative equals a positive, and 4 divided by 1 equals 4. And that's my answer. This one's, let me do, I'm going to keep doing several examples. This one's an easy one, just in case anybody needs more examples. There's some trickier ones up ahead. I want to get w by itself, so the 2 in front of the w, I'm going to move last. The first thing I'm going to move is the minus 7 by adding 7 to both sides. That'll give me negative 2, because negative 9 plus 7 is negative 2. And I got 2w on this side. Now I'm going to divide both sides by 2 to get rid of the 2 from here. So w is going to be less than a negative divided by a positive equals a negative, and 2 divided by 2 equals 1. So w is less than negative 1. Okay, now here I want to point something out, because this is written, this is how they write it in IXL, but this is not mathematically correct. They're supposed to put parentheses, because I believe I've said it in this class. You're not allowed to put two signs like that next to each other. They're supposed to put parentheses here. In IXL, for whatever reason, they're not putting parentheses there, so just be aware. I'm going to do the problem anyways. Okay, now let me tell you the key to making this problem simple, because it looks a little weird. It looks strange like that. Let me tell you the key to making it look simple. The key is this. I hate writing it the way they wrote it, but I'm going to do it. It bothers me to write it that way, because that's incorrect. There should be parentheses there. But look, the key is first simplify this. two negatives become a positive. Two negatives next to each other become a positive. So if I simplify that, it would be the correct way. I'm sorry, I'm going to write the parentheses. It bothers me too much to see that. Okay, the two negatives become a positive. Now once you simplify it, the problem becomes much easier to understand. If you don't simplify it and try to start moving pieces to the other side without simplifying it, you're very likely going to get confused and make a mistake. All right, so first simplify whatever could be simplified before you start moving anything. Okay, so now it becomes easy. The number in front of the variable, I move last. I'm going to move this one first. To get rid of the negative 8, I'm going to add 8 to both sides. When I add 8, this cancels out. Negative 9 plus 8 is going to give me negative 1. So now I got that. And I'm going to move the 1 and do the opposite of multiplying by 1, which will be dividing by 1. And n is going to be less than negative 1. Alright, this one's the first one that I've seen with a fraction or with division, so let's look at it. So again, you want to get, in this one, you want to get y by itself. The number that's with the variable, you move last. The number that's with the variable, you move last. So first I'm going to get rid of the minus 3. I'm going to get rid of the minus 3 by adding 3 to both sides. I'm going to add 3 to both sides. Right here, this will cancel out. Right here, this gives me 5. So now I got this. Y divided by 2 is greater than or equal to 5. I still want to get y by itself, so I got to move the 2 to the other side and do the opposite of division, which is multiplication. Now listen, I'm not writing it, but what I'm doing to both, well, I guess I am writing it, but this is what I'm doing to both sides. Because this will cancel out the 2's. And on this side, you'll get 5 times 2, which is 10. And that's my answer. The shortcut way, as I'm sure most of you are aware, is to just move the 2 and write it over here. That's how I normally do it, but I'm just trying to make sure you're all following along. I'm multiplying both sides by positive 2. And that would be my final answer. Y is greater than or equal to positive 10. In the next class, we're going to be doing the same thing, but in addition to solving the inequality, you're also going to have to graph it, which you've already done. But for today's class, we're just solving the inequality. Alright, so here we go. Same type of problem that we just did. So g divided by negative 2 plus 5 is greater than, is greater than 6. I want to get g by itself. The number that's with the variable, I'm going to move last. The first thing I'm going to move is the plus 5. And I'm going to move it by doing the opposite of adding 5, which is subtracting 5 from both sides of the inequality. Alright, so 5 minus 5 is 0, so this canceled out. And over here, 6 minus 5 is 1. So I got that. Now I'm still trying to get g by itself, so I want to get rid of that negative 2. And I'm going to do it by, the long way is to write that you're multiplying both sides by negative 2. Which is the opposite of dividing by negative 2. The short way is to just write it over here. Alright, so this cancels out. And g, oh, you know what? I almost forgot. So in this one, since I'm multiplying both sides by a negative number, the sign flips. The sign flips directions. Okay, and my answer is going to be g is less than negative 2. Again, that's the main thing to look out for. When you multiply or divide both sides by a negative number, be aware the sign is going to flip. That's the main thing to watch out for. Okay, so here we go, another one. So 3 minus z less than or equal to 9. Okay, so imagine an invisible 1 right here. And that should make it easier. You know what? I'm going to explain 2 different ways that you could think about this problem. Alright, so one way that you could think about it is, I'm going to first, imagine there's an invisible 1 here. Alright, so the number that's with the variable, I get rid of last. The first thing I'm going to get rid of is this 3 by subtracting 3 from both sides. If I subtract 3 from both sides, I'll have negative z less than or equal to 6. Okay, now I said imagine that there's a 1 here. There is an invisible 1 here. Let me draw it because it'll make it easier to visualize. To get rid of that -1, that -1 is multiplying with a z. So to get rid of it, I got to divide both sides by -1. If I divide both sides by -1, first of all, the sign has to flip directions. So the sign is going to flip. Over here, -1 divided by -1 is +1. So that cancels this out, and you're just left with z. And over here, a positive divided by a negative equals a negative. And 6 divided by 1 is 6. That's my answer. I'm going to show you another way that you could think about it that you may find easier. The other way, I'll write it right here. So another way that you could do it is like this. Okay, what I could do is this. I could move the -z, I can move it to the right by just going like this. Whatever I do to one side, I got to do to the other side. Okay, so on this side, -z plus z cancels out. This canceled out. So I'm left with this 3. I'm left with this sign right here. Now, you cannot add these. You cannot add these because they are not like terms. So that's going to give me just z. I'm just going to write z plus 9. You could also write 9 plus z. Alright, I think it makes it easier to see if I write z plus 9, but if you write 9 plus z, that's the exact same thing. Okay, now I'm still trying to get z by itself, so I'm going to move the 9 to the left by doing the opposite of adding 9, which would be subtracting 9 from both sides. Alright, so if I subtract 9 from both sides, 9 minus 9 is 0. So now I got on this side, I just got the z by itself, and on this side, 3 minus 9 is -6. Now, if I rewrite the answer from the point of view of the z, it says z is greater than or equal to. Alright, greater than or equal to. Make sure you write that correctly. The big side is pointing towards the z, the little side is pointing towards -6. So the big side of this sign is pointing towards the z, or the alligator mouth is pointing towards the z, and the little side is pointing towards -6. Alright, so both ways, I get the same answer. So look, the quick way of thinking about this one is I just move z to the right by adding it and 9 to the left by subtracting it. That's the quick way of thinking about it. Move z to the right by adding it, move 9 to the left by subtracting it. Okay, so let's look at this example. I got -2q minus 1 is greater than 3. Alright, so again, the number that's with the variable, I'm going to move last. The first thing I'm going to move is this -1 by adding 1 to both sides. When I do that, I'm going to get a +4 here. This canceled out, so I'm just going to move down the -2q. Now hopefully you can see that I'm about to divide by a negative number, which is going to cause the sign to flip. Alright, so I'm going to divide. To get rid of this -2, I got to move it to the right and do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. When I divide both sides by a negative number, the sign is going to flip directions. So now I got q is less than -2. Here I want to get m by itself. Okay, so I'm going to move the 9 to the right by subtracting it. Because the number that's with the variable, you move last. First, you got to move this number. 9 minus 9 cancels out. 8 minus 9 is -1. So now I got m divided by -18 is less than or equal to -1. So since I want to get rid of that -18, and the -18 is dividing, it says m divided by -18. I got to do the opposite of dividing by -18, which would be multiplying both sides by -18. Alright, since I'm multiplying both sides by a negative number, the sign has to flip. I got to flip the sign. Right here, -18 divided by -18 is +1. They cancel out. So I'm left with m greater than or equal to. A negative times a negative equals a positive, and 1 times 18 is 18. And there's my answer. Almost done. This one's a little too simple. I'm going to skip this one. I've already done enough examples like that. I've done examples like this one, but let's look at it anyways. I haven't done too many like this, so let's look at this one. All right, so I'm going to do it. This time, let me do this one the fast way first and then the slow way. I'm going to do it the fast way first. All right, the fast way to do it is to think about it this way. I want to change that minus s to a positive s. So let's move the s to the right by just going like this. Alright, this will cancel out. So now I'm left with 7 greater than. Right here, I cannot combine negative 2 plus s because they are not like terms. So I could just write s minus 2, or you could also write negative 2 plus s. I prefer putting the variable in the front. Now my last step is, I'm still trying to get s by itself, so I'm going to move the minus 2 to the left by adding 2 to both sides. When you do that, this cancels out, and I'm going to be left with s is less than 9. Or to write it like this, s is less than 9. That's my answer. Now let me also do it the long way, in case you didn't get it that way. The longer version, or the other version of how you could do it would be like this. There's my problem. Okay, so again, imagine, you know what, instead of imagining, let me draw it. There's an invisible one here. Let me just write it because it'll help me explain it. Alright, so the number that's with the variable, I'm going to move last. The first thing I'm going to move is this 7. So I'm going to get rid of that 7 by subtracting both sides by 7. Over here, this cancels out. Over here, this will give me negative 9. So right now I got negative 1 s greater than negative 9. Now I'm still trying to get the s by itself, so I'm going to get rid of that negative 1. And the way I'm going to get rid of it is by dividing both sides by negative 1. Since the negative 1 is multiplying, I'm going to do the opposite of multiplying by negative 1, which is dividing both sides by negative 1. When you divide both sides by a negative number, the sign flips directions. So the sign is going to flip to this. Negative 1 divided by negative 1 equals positive 1. So that cancels out. And negative 9 divided by negative 1 is positive 9. Whoops, that didn't come out nice, but s is less than 9. As you can see, it's the same answer I got right here. S is less than 9. They both give you the same answer. This is the quicker and easier way. But if you don't see it, then this is another way that you could do it. I'm going to skip that one because I've already done several examples like that one. Let's look at this one. Alright, so the number that's with the variable, I'm going to move last. The first thing I'm going to get rid of is the minus 10 by adding 10 to both sides. Okay, so once I do that, I'll have negative 12j is greater than 12. So now to get rid of this, to get rid of the negative 12, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 12. When I divide both sides by a negative number, the sign flips. Negative 12 divided by negative 12 is positive 1, so that cancels out. And positive 12 divided by negative 12 equals negative 1. And there's my answer, j is less than negative 1. Let me see how many more examples we have to go before. Okay, so let me do this one and the last one, and I'll end it. Because I think I've done more than enough examples. Alright, so this one, it says 89 is greater than or equal to 51 minus b. Alright, so this one, again, I can show you two different ways to do it. You should understand them both. They're both simple. Okay, so the first way I would recommend that you could do it is, let me do it the long way and then I'll do it the short way. Okay, the long way would be, first, imagine a 1 here. There's a 1 here. There's an invisible 1 there. So the first thing I'm going to get rid of is this 51 by subtracting both sides by 51. 9 minus 1 is 8. 8 minus 5 is 3. This canceled out. So now I got negative 1b here. I just wrote the 1 to help you visualize what I'm telling you to do. Okay, now I'm still trying to get b by itself. So to get rid of that negative 1, I'm going to do the opposite of multiplying by negative 1, which would mean dividing both sides by negative 1. When you divide both sides by a negative number, the sign flips directions. Okay, negative 1 divided by negative 1 is positive 1, so that cancels out. And over here, 38 divided by negative 1 is negative 38. If I write it from the point of view of b, b is greater than or equal to negative 38. That is the answer. Okay, now here's the faster way to do it. All right, the faster way that I would have done it is like this. Okay, I could see that says minus b, so what I could do is just move minus b to the other side so that it'll turn into positive b. If I add b to both sides, right? Okay, negative b plus b, that cancels out. This 51 stays here. The sign stays the same. Over here, I cannot add that because those are not like terms. So all I'm going to do is put them next to each other. B plus 89. Or 89 plus b is fine as well, but I prefer to write the variable first. Now the last step is let's just move the 89 to the right by subtracting it. Alright, 89 minus 89 is 0. Okay, so b is greater than or equal to. Okay, now right here, 51 minus 89, you have to realize the answer has to be negative because you're taking away more than 51 from 51. So the answer has to be negative. Now what number goes here? To get the number that goes there, you got to get the difference between 89 and 51, which means you subtract, which I did earlier. 89 minus 51 is going to give you 38. Don't use a calculator. Please try not to use a calculator. As you can see, both methods gave me the same answer. But I think this is the quicker and easier method if you see what I'm doing. Alright, and I'm going to do one more example. I may have done too many examples today, but hopefully you're understanding it. Alright, let's do this one. Okay, so my goal is to get v by itself. So the first thing I'm going to do this two ways as well. Alright, the long way is to first move the 62 to the left by adding it. I'm sorry, to move the negative 62 to the left by adding it. This will cancel out. This is the long way. And over here, negative 90 plus 62. Alright, your answer has to be negative because you're at, just to help you visualize, you're at negative 90. Okay, if you add negative 90 plus 90, you'd be at 0. You're adding less than 90, so you're going to fall shorter. You're going to fall short of 0, which is going to be a negative number. Okay, now to find out what number that's going to be, you got to subtract these numbers. It's going to be negative, and just subtract these numbers to get the answer that goes here. Okay, you cannot take away 2 from 0, so I'm going to make the 0 bigger by borrowing 1 from the 9. The 9 becomes an 8, and the one that you borrowed, you put in front of the 0 to make it 10. 10 minus 2 is 8. 8 minus 6 is 2. Alright, so negative 90 plus 62 is negative 28. If that seems complicated, I'll show you another way in a second that's easier. But you should understand that. That's adding and subtracting integers. Okay, so now I have this. Now, just for the sake of helping me explain it to you, imagine the one that's right here. I'm trying to get v by itself. So to get rid of that negative 1, which is multiplying with the v, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 1. When I divide both sides by negative 1, the sign is going to flip directions. Negative 1 divided by negative 1 is positive 1, so that cancels out. Negative 28 divided by negative 1 is positive 28. So my answer is v is greater than 28. Alright, now let me do it the shorter, quicker way. Alright, remember that answer because I'm about to erase it. v is greater than 28. Alright, the faster way is to do it like this. I could just move the minus v to the other side by adding v to both sides, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to add v to both sides. So plus v plus v. Alright, so right here, negative v plus v cancels out. Right here, I cannot add these because they are not like terms. So it's just going to be v minus 90 is greater than negative 62. Now I'm going to move the minus 90 to the other side, okay, by doing the opposite of subtracting 90, which would be adding 90 to both sides. That way this will cancel out. I'll have v is greater than. Okay, now negative 62 plus 90. Your answer is going to be positive. And the answer is the same as doing, like, that means the same thing as doing 90 minus 62. And you're going to get v is greater than 28, just like I got in the other example. By the way, if you're having trouble picturing that, here's a number line. If you're at negative 62, negative 62 plus 62 will get you here. If you're doing negative 62 plus more than 62, you're adding 90, it's going to be a positive number by the difference. The difference means subtract. By the difference between 90 and 68, which is 28. Okay, so that's the last example I'm going to do. Your assignment is K1, section K1. You have to get up to 100 points. If you're a new student, make sure you heard me on that. You have to get up to 100 points on all your IXL assignments. Once you get 100, I give you an A. If you get less than 100, I put a 0 until you get to 100. Okay, so your assignment is in IXL in the Algebra 1 section, section K.8, which is on solving two-step linear inequalities.